Hey guys, how's it going? Myth14 here, and today we'll be talking a little more about optimizing your efficiency when you're trying to do research in Azur Lane. It's been a while since we've had a video, but let's get into it. So why do you think you should be worrying about optimizing your research? So there are a lot of different ways to actually optimize your research, whether for speed, consistency. There's always a good way of making it easier for you for the process of research. At fastest, you can get a priority ship done in 6 days if you want to collect them as quickly as possible, and the faster you get research done, the less you really have to worry about the tasks required. Also, if you play Azur Lane casually, getting a good optimized schedule might actually is a good way of building habits for everyday use. So those are some of the reasons why optimizing your research can help you, and in this video I'm going to go through a few ideas on how to optimize research that are pretty simple to implement. Real quick, I'm going to give you a recap of all of the requirements for each research project. You'll be able to pause the video right now in order to see the table. So when I'm talking about optimization and research, I'm really referring to the 1 million, the 2 million XP tasks, as well as the 5 and 8 research projects tasks. So keep in mind that each task unlocks 24 hours after the previous task, with the exception of tasks 7 and 8, which are the coins and wisdom cubes. They unlock on the same time at the last day, so it takes a total of 6 days to get every single task unlocked. It's important to keep in mind that you can only begin acquiring XP for 2 million once you've gotten the first 1 million, and the same for the 8 research for the 5 research. 13 research projects isn't too big of a problem since most of them are typically 2 to 8 hours long, so you should be able to finish them all within 6 days if you play and keep to your timers regularly. That being said, the focus of this video will be talking about optimizing the 3 million XP, and for the sake of this video, the main optimizations we will be talking about are consistency, speed, and fuel. Talking about how much you can get out of grinding a specific world, how much time you need to spend grinding, and how much of your fuel needs to go into the grind. There will be timestamps here for you to go to if you want to listen to a particular one, or if you want to hear my full story, go ahead and go to the 4th timestamp. So the first optimization we'll be talking about is consistency, which is how much can you get out of grinding a specific world. Most players might not have access to all the worlds at this given time, and much less be able to clear some of the higher levels with fleets that are optimized for grinding research. Additionally, not every player will have access to the high level ships or the good equipment in order to traverse those higher levels to begin with. The most important thing to know when you grind is that you always want to achieve S rank in order to not lose any XP due to penalties. The best way to understand consistency optimization is to note what levels give you a good amount of XP at a given time. Here's a little graph showing the XP averages of each world. Feel free to pause the video right now to take a look at this graph for a little longer. Taking into consideration what this graph gives you, I recommend picking a world where you can start off with ships without worrying about having levels to carry through the map. Meaning that you can grind the ship consistently and grow with them as they gain levels. Personally, I find World 8 to be one of the better worlds for 3 main reasons. World 8 is the last world that requires 4 or less fights to reach the boss node. This means that you can use a single fleet to finish the map and not worry about reduced damage penalty for having no fuel. There are no carriers in World 8, so you don't need to worry about anti-air or having your backline ships taking too much damage, especially if you are raising Monarch and Ibuki, or Izuma. And World 8 is the first world where you can earn 10,000 experience per fight if you use a maximized XP lineup. Overall, consistency optimization isn't really a difficult concept though, and it's actually a basis for the other 2 optimizations which we will discuss next. It's not so much a grind mentality so much as it's an introduction to you understanding what you are capable of doing and what your ships are capable of doing. So this is a really important way for new players and for casual players to start building good habits, and it helps build into the other 2 optimizations that we will talk about next. Starting off with speed optimization, how long do you need to really grind? If you're looking to get that 3 million grind as quickly as possible in as few sittings as possible, going for speed is definitely the key. Going for speed though assumes that you have a relatively high amount of excess resources, or at least resources that you're willing to expend, as well as having a good amount of free time that you want to devote to completing the grind. In terms of speed optimization, the ultimate key to victory is to maximize the amount of XP you get in each individual fight and completing each fight in the quickest possible time. So things to know about maximizing your XP. Remember that research always requires ships with a specific class and faction, so you should always have 3 of ships of that fulfill those conditions in order to get the most XP out of each fight. Any ship that receives MVP will get double experience, and if your ship is on flagship position, which is only important for Monarch and Izumo, you get 1.5 times experience, which both stack, so an MVP flagship can get 3 times experience. Ships that haven't been limit broken or awakened to expand their level cap can still accumulate up to 3 million experience in storage, and that XP does count towards the research progress. And getting an A rank reduces the amount of XP down to a ×8.3 multiplier rather than a ×1 multiplier. And lastly, ships with a morale of 120 or higher gets a 20% increase in XP gain. Here's that graph again so that we can keep track of the numbers for each map, how much experience you get on average. Knowing some of the information from the previous slide and considering what we know about the graph, when creating our fleet, we know that we want 3 ships that fulfill condition for research. We want ideally one of those ships to consistently get the MVP every fight. All 3 ships should be capable of surviving the fight regardless of any damage taken, as well as any other ships needed to fill out the fleet. And every ship should be placed in the dorm, preferably in the 2nd floor, for morale management. From here, for the sake of the video, we are going to assume the slowest possible optimization, which means that you begin as soon as all 3 million XP are unlocked, so you will get all 3 million XP in one concurrent run. With this in mind, we can calculate the XP we get per fight and how much we need to grind for. Again, this is just to reiterate the slowest possible optimization, which means that we have a total of 3 possible days to gain 3 million XP. But we can calculate how much effective time is spent on grinding. And this is a little bit of math. Feel free to pause right now in order to get a better glimpse of what the math entails. Ultimately, speed optimization in terms of the end goal is not particularly difficult to understand. It just assumes that if you're able to finish the run, how quickly can you finish the run in order to acquire the max XP. With speed optimization, we've learned based on the math in the previous slide that it is entirely doable to gain all 3 million XP in less than a day. That being said, speed optimization assumes you have the resources to support the playstyle, so do approach with caution and be mindful that it isn't necessarily a race to finish every priority ship. I really only talked about this to demonstrate the fastest possible method of completion in order to give you an idea of how not as intimidating the grind really is. Lastly, we'll talk about fuel optimization. So with priority ships being released in the middle of the Kizun-I event and the Operation Manju event in the EN server, a fair amount of players might not be keen on spending large amounts of fuel outside of events to complete the grind. But fuel optimization doesn't necessarily imply that you have no fuel, but that you want to get the most XP using as little fuel as possible. The key to getting a good fuel optimization is to understand how much fuel income you generate, and then maximize your playtime to using a 1-to-1 ratio with your fuel income. So you'll be generating fuel, and you'll spend as much fuel as you generate. A few numbers to know about fuel income. So at max level, the canteen generates 90 fuel per hour and holds 3,000 fuel in itself. In a single day, this means that you generate 2,160 fuel. In a week, that's 15,120, so it doesn't go all the way to the cap. Assuming you do all of the dailies, you get an additional 520 fuel, totaling 3640 fuel from dailies over the week. And lastly, weeklies generate 2750 fuel. Overall, if you exclude commissions and any other way of generating fuel artificially, your guaranteed fuel income is around 2,680, and at the end of the week, you'll have a little more than 21.5 thousand fuel generated through all your quests. So with these numbers in mind, how would our fleet look? So when we want to create our fleet with fuel optimization in mind, we want to stay as close to the daily income in our division as possible. We also want to use the weekly income more like a soft cap to let us keep track of when we're starting to get excessive when we spend fuel. Regardless of which ship we are developing, we still want to maximize the XP gain, so having 3 ships that fulfill the grind requirement is important. But it's important to determine whether or not we are using frontline focus or backline focus. And here's a little chart that kind of expands upon this idea. You can feel free to pause the video now to get a better glimpse, but it is mainly just an image representation of some of the points I made in the previous slide. Ultimately though, fuel optimization is a pretty useful skill for any player to get knowledge of. Even outside of the grind, being able to understand the balance between fuel income and usage are what allow you to extend the playtime. It makes it so that a single session lasts a lot longer and that late game players don't feel burdened about having to spend time doing grinds and eventually burning out. When I combined my consistency, speed, and fuel optimizations, that was how I became part of the first week Monarch game, which is just a way of completing the tasks before the 7th and 8th task was completed. So I basically finished Monarch right as every task was unlocked, and that allowed me to get her as the moment that those 2 tasks were completed, and I now have a Monarch. I think I have the record, but some of the strategy that I used was that for consistency I used World 8 in order to increase the level on some of my safety level ships, while also minimizing the number of fleets I use. In terms of speeds, I use one of 2 formations, either a triple backline with a solo frontline with the MVP flagship funnel, or I was using 2 single ship comps where I would use 1 frontline, 1 backline, with the flagship being guaranteed to get MVP. Lastly, for fuel, during the first 3 days of the research development, I tried to get the 1 million XP distributed evenly among the 3 days so that I could grind consistently each day. During the second 3 days, I did the same for the 2 million XP. Granted, this essentially doubled my XP. Here you can see some of my progress on how quickly I finished the first million and then the 2 million XP, and ultimately that these optimizations made it so that I was able to complete Monarch in relatively good time. Ultimately though, it was a really tough experience to go through the grind. I was pretty low on fuel actually, where during the 2 million portion, and I had to actually be a little smarter about my fuel usage in order to make it to the end. Hence the reason why I started switching over to 2 single line fleets rather than the triple backline fleet at times. Thankfully, I kind of clutched it out with a few gems that I didn't use yet in order to get a few extra fuels. The first million is not too bad, but the second half where you do 2 million is where a lot of players kind of start to feel a little burnout, since you want to go as quickly as possible, but you need to pace yourself in order to not feel tired of consistently grinding the same map repeatedly. And writing out the rough patches gave me the inspiration to make this video. Actually, it was kind of a continuation on how I wanted to end my mini-series on priority ships and research, and ultimately I hope that you guys learn a bit from my first grind to make this things easier for you guys. It definitely will help me understand what my pace will be in the future if I want to rush more ships. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoy this type of content, please like, comment, and subscribe. There's going to be more in a little more consistent schedule now that I am off the grind.